one of the most disturbing cases you've ever heard, the horrible story of Brooke Ellison. Ely, Nevada, White Pine County, October 2003. It began with a single photograph, left behind on a frost-covered windshield. A grainy image of a girl staring directly into the lens, eyes glassy, mouth parted, as if she were about to say something but never got the chance. Before we begin, I want to let you know that due to the limited visual materials and the age of this case, there isn't much existing footage or imagery to support the story you're about to hear. As a result, this episode will feature a single image background throughout. Think of this as more of an immersive audio experience, a storytelling session that lets your imagination fill in the gaps. Now's the perfect time to grab your headphones, maybe even some popcorn, and settle in. Brooke Ellison was last seen the morning of October 18th, 2003, just outside her family's cabin on the eastern slopes of Nevada's Shell Creek Range. A quiet, wide-eyed 17-year-old with a growing interest in wildlife photography and hiking, Brooke had been spending that weekend with her mother and younger brother before she vanished, leaving behind no signs of struggle, no clear motive, and no trail to follow. This is her story. Brooke was a senior at White Pine High School in Ely, a straight-A student with a love for animals and a tendency to withdraw into sketchbooks and birding journals. She wasn't the type to draw much attention, but in the months leading up to her disappearance, her demeanor began to shift subtly but perceptibly. Her friends noticed first. She stopped attending the after-school photography club. She became unusually distracted during class, often staring out the window. She had dropped out of homecoming plans without explanation, even though she'd already bought a dress weeks before. She was just not there. One classmate would later say during the initial round of questioning, it felt like she was carrying something heavy around and not telling anyone. Her mother, Karen Ellison, chalked it up to the pressures of graduation and college preparation. But there was more beneath the surface. On October 17th, a Friday, Karen drove Brooke and her 9-year-old brother Max to their family's seasonal cabin near Cave Lake State Park, an annual fall tradition meant to give them a quiet weekend before winter. It was cold, even by Nevada standards. The air hung thick with low fog, and frost clung to the pine needles like ash. They arrived just after dusk. The generator was fired up. Brooke didn't unpack. The following morning, Karen rose at 6:30 a.m. to start coffee and stack firewood. She saw Brooke briefly at around 7:15, wrapped in her gray hoodie and hiking boots, camera around her neck, heading toward the tree line behind the cabin. She said she was going to photograph mule deer along the ridgeline and would be back before breakfast. She never returned. By 9 a.m., Karen began calling her name into the trees. By 11 o'clock, she was walking the perimeter of the property, yelling until her throat was raw. By 1:30, a call was placed to the White Pine County Sheriff's Office. Search teams arrived within the hour. The terrain around Cave Lake is rugged and dense, an unforgiving sprawl of pine forests, glacial rocks, and concealed ravines. Temperatures can swing drastically, dropping below freezing by late afternoon in October. Snow had not yet arrived, but ice was present in shaded groves. The sky remained low and colorless, giving the forest a sense of endless dusk. Deputies, volunteers, and dogs combed a 12-mile radius over the next 3 days. Drones were not common in 2003, so all aerial footage relied on an aging county helicopter with limited visibility due to thick tree cover. What they did find on the evening of day 2 chilled them more than the weather. Roughly 1.7 miles east of the cabin, just below a granite outcrop locals call Hunter's Hollow, searchers located Brooke's Canon camera. It was half buried under a thin layer of pine needles, lens cap off, strap torn. The SD card was missing. Not far from the camera was a red thread snagged on a thorny branch, identified later as matching the inner lining of Brooke's hoodie. Beyond that, there was nothing. No blood, no prints, no signs of animal activity. It was as if she had evaporated. In a town like Ely, population just over 4,000, mysteries don't stay quiet for long. By the end of the first week, theories had begun to take shape in whispers and gas station parking lots. Some blamed wild predators. Others pointed to transient hunters or hikers off the grid. But a few residents, especially those familiar with the old miner trails cutting to the Shell Creek foothills, spoke of something stranger. "People see things out there," said Mark Isbell, a retired park ranger interviewed a year later. "Not animals, not people either. Shapes that move in fog and vanish when you shine a light on them. Sounds like someone walking behind you, but there's nobody there. That mountain holds secrets." The sheriff's office dismissed these accounts as unverified and unrelated, but the stories persisted, especially after what was found on day 6. Karen Ellison returned to the cabin a week after her daughter vanished. She had refused to leave Ely, staying at a nearby motel, and returned only to retrieve some belongings and speak with investigators. When she reached the gravel lot just outside the cabin gate, she found a photograph resting face up on the windshield of her SUV. It was curled at the edges and slightly damp. It showed Brooke, undeniably Brooke, standing in what looked like a clearing, eyes wide and glinting from the flash. Her hair was tangled. Hoodie was partially unzipped. There were trees behind her, but behind the trees was something else, a faint outline, a tall shape, dark, almost humanoid, partially obscured by a blur. The photo was examined by law enforcement, but no fingerprint was found, no trace of who had placed it there. The photo was never released to the public. The image was filed away under Evidence 48C, cataloged but never explained. Multiple theories emerged over the next 2 months. Investigators mapped out a provisional timeline. 7:15 a.m. Brooke is last seen by her mother heading into the woods. 7:40 a.m. A camper at the nearby East Creek trailhead recalls hearing a short scream echo down the valley, not reported until 2 days later. 8:05 a.m. A local hiker claims he saw someone moving fast through the trees along the ridge trail, heading north. When asked later, he admitted he couldn't tell the person's gender, only that they wore a gray top. 9:10 a.m. A hunter finds a torn piece of notebook paper wedged under a rock. It read only, "Don't follow me, please." Handwriting analysis was inconclusive. Despite these fragmented reports, no credible suspect was ever identified. No ransom, no communication, no digital footprints. FBI support was briefly brought in, but the case was never federally escalated. In December 2003, just before snowfall sealed off most of the Shell Creek trails for the season, Karen Ellison returned to the cabin one last time, this time with a local reporter hoping to write a piece for the Ely Daily Times. During the visit, Karen opened the old tool shed behind the property, a building rarely used since her husband's passing. Inside, everything was undisturbed except for one wall. Scratched into the wood, faint but deliberate, were letters that looked like they had been carved with a nail or key. It read, "Look for me where the air stops." It was never confirmed who had carved it. No fingerprints, no tool marks. But Karen swore that message wasn't the last time she opened the shed, just weeks prior. Some interpreted it as a cry for help. Others saw it as a taunt. Investigators photographed the message, labeled it Cite Evidence S3, and once again found themselves with no direction to pursue. More than 20 years have passed since Brooke Ellison walked into those woods. Her case remains open. Nobody has ever been found. No remains. No conclusive evidence of abduction. No sightings deemed credible. Her bedroom in Ely remains untouched. Photos of owls, a wall calendar from 2003, a half-finished sketch of a raven on her desk. Each October, local volunteers host a candlelight vigil at Cave Lake, placing photographs of Brooke along the walking paths. One of the images is a copy of that final photo, the one found on Karen's windshield. The original remains sealed in county evidence archives. In 2016, a podcast episode briefly reignited interest in the case. Listeners sent in tips, some claiming to see figures in the woods of similar shape. One caller from Reno claimed they met a woman at a rest stop in 2007 who looked exactly like that missing girl, just older and scared. None of the tips ever led to a breakthrough. In missing persons cases, the first 24 hours are often called a golden window, the brief span where the right decision or the wrong assumption can change everything. In Brooke Ellison's case, those first 24 hours remain as opaque and confounding today as they were in 2003. This episode walks hour by hour through the day Brooke vanished, from the still Freezing dawn to the haunting silence of dusk, and the subtle but critical moments where something went wrong. The temperature hovered just below 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Frost covered the front windows of the Ellison cabin. Inside, Karen Ellison had already stirred from sleep, placing coffee on the stovetop and beginning her usual morning routine. Loading the wood stove, stacking kindling, preparing breakfast. Her daughter, Brooke, emerged from her bedroom wearing thermal leggings, hiking boots, and a gray zip-up hoodie. She carried her Canon EOS 300 film camera and a small weathered leather notebook, something she used for bird sketching and tracking trail details. There was no conversation, just a simple phrase exchanged before Brooke stepped outside. "I'll be back before Max is up." Brooke was seen for the last confirmed time by her mother. She stepped through the low wooden gate, crossed a narrow trailhead, and vanished into the dense pine and fir forest behind the property. Karen noted that Brooke didn't bring her backpack or water. She assumed it was a quick outing, something familiar and harmless. The frost hadn't yet melted, and her footprints were visible in the shallow, frozen dirt. But they disappeared just 200 yards in, where the forest floor turned into thick underbrush and loose granite. Jeff Ruland, 64, a retired mailman from Carson City, had parked his RV at the East Creek trailhead the night before. He was up early, sitting outside in a camp chair, drinking coffee from a thermos. According to his later interview with investigators, he heard a short, sharp sound, something between a shout and a scream, coming from the direction of Hunter's Hollow, a rocky ridge southwest of his position. "I thought it was a coyote or a fox calling," he told deputies. But then it just stopped, like it was cut off. He did not report the sound until 2 days later, after hearing about the search efforts. Peter Navarre, 31, a local landscape photographer, was hiking with his dog near Ridge Hollow. He later told investigators he saw someone moving quickly, like jogging or stumbling, along a higher ridgeline roughly 400 yards away. They were in gray, slim build, could have been male or female, but they were alone and they looked frantic. Navarre didn't report this until approached during a community canvass on October 20th. He couldn't confirm the direction the figure was heading, only that it disappeared behind a cluster of aspens. No physical evidence was recovered at that location. By this time, Karen Ellison had become uneasy. Brooke had never missed breakfast during their annual cabin trips, and the forest behind their property wasn't difficult terrain for someone familiar. She called her daughter's name for nearly 30 minutes, retracing the initial trail, but finding no footprints past the frost line. At 9:16 a.m., she placed the first call to the White Pine County Sheriff's Department. The dispatcher's log reads, "Caller, Karen Ellison. Reports missing 17-year-old daughter. Last seen 7:15 a.m. entering wooded area near Ridgeview Trail. Unarmed, wearing a gray hoodie, hiking boots, carrying a camera. No known threats or disputes. Requesting immediate assistance." Deputy Nolan Reyes was the first officer on the scene. He conducted a quick perimeter walk, finding only partial boot marks near the tree line, faint due to rising temperatures and sun exposure. No obvious signs of a struggle. No dropped items. No drag marks. Shortly after, search and rescue volunteers arrived from the nearby Fire District 1, forming a 3-person hasty team to begin an initial sweep west of the cabin toward Hunter's Hollow. At this point, the working theory was a minor disorientation event. The tone was urgent but not yet panicked. Roughly 2 miles northwest, volunteers found an abandoned campsite with blue tarp, a folding chair, and a pile of charred wood. Beneath the tarp, an eerie sweatshirt, partially buried in the dirt. For several tense hours, authorities feared it might be Brooke's. But forensic testing and clothing tags confirmed it belonged to a different hiker, an adult woman who had camped there earlier in the week and left the shirt behind. The false lead consumed valuable manpower until it was ruled out at 4:45 p.m. A search dog named Tango, a trained scent hound, led his handler to a shallow depression roughly 1.7 miles east of the cabin. There, lying amid pine needles and broken twigs, was Brooke's Canon camera. The lens was intact. The strap, however, was partially shredded, as if torn or yanked. Inside the battery compartment, condensation, suggesting the camera had been left exposed for hours. The SD card was missing. Investigators dusted for prints. None were found. The camera became evidence marker A1 in the official case file. About 50 yards from the camera, another volunteer located a piece of notebook paper tucked under a rock, weighted with a pebble. Written in shaky, unaligned block letters. "Don't follow me. Please." Initial media speculation suggested it was a farewell note. Karen confirmed that Brooke did keep a small journal with her, but did not recognize the handwriting. Handwriting analysts later ruled it inconclusive, neither a match nor a full disqualification. The note ultimately went unexplained and may not have been related at all. By early afternoon, a full search operation was underway. The sheriff's office designated the event as a Category 3 missing persons response, meaning immediate deployment of trained SAR units with canine and aerial support. Volunteers, deputies, and wildlife wardens fanned out in a structured grid pattern, covering a 3-mile radius from the Ellison cabin. Search markers were placed. GPS logs were created for each team. A scent trail was briefly established near Ridge Hollow, but was lost 40 minutes later at a dry creek bed. Searchers reported unusually quiet conditions. No birds, no movement, almost unnaturally still air. Sheriff Lowell Harrington held a brief media conference outside the county station in Ely. "We are conducting an active search and remain optimistic. At this time, there is no evidence to suggest foul play. Miss Ellison is a well-equipped young woman with experience in this terrain. We are asking the public to remain vigilant and report any sightings or information." The statement was meant to comfort, but its vague language stirred local worry. Brooke's disappearance was now the lead story on Cooley Radio and later picked up by Reno news outlets. Brooke's name and photograph were officially entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Person System (NAMUS). Flyers were printed and distributed around Ely and neighboring communities. The flyer described her as 17 years old, 5 feet 5 inches, 114 pounds, shoulder-length brown hair, green eyes, wearing a gray zip-up hoodie, hiking boots, and no backpack. It also included a caution: maybe disoriented or injured, do not approach alone. Contact local authorities immediately. Ryan Jameson, 15, was camping with his father south of Cave Lake. He later claimed that around sunset, he saw something flash across a distant ridge, a glint like metal reflecting light. He looked through binoculars and believed he saw a figure standing still among the trees, just watching. When he looked back, the figure was gone. Investigators checked the area the next morning. No footprints, no evidence. But the story added to a growing sense of unease about what might be moving in the woods at dusk. As light failed, the air temperature dropped rapidly to 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Teams recalled and reassembled near the cabin for final head counts. Tango, the scent dog, attempted a second trail from the camera site. He tracked northeast for 200 yards, then abruptly stopped, whining and refusing to continue. The behavior was logged as unusual refusal, a rare occurrence in well-trained scent dogs. His handler noted no physical obstacles or animal interference. The trail was lost. Deputies returned Karen and Max to Ely under escort. Before leaving, Karen walked once more behind the cabin and stood silently at the edge of the trees. A neighbor helping with logistics noted that she whispered something into the woods to send her back. As the first night passed, the profile of the case had changed. Brooke's disappearance was no longer considered a typical lost hiker case. No ransom note, no communication, no digital trace. Her cell phone, found back at the cabin charging on her nightstand, had no recent texts or calls after October 17th at 10:32 p.m. The FBI was notified, though no federal involvement occurred at this stage. Privately, some officers suspected abduction. Others leaned toward a mental health episode. But without a single witness confirming her movements after 7:15 a.m., all paths remained speculative. On October 21st, 3 days after Brooke vanished, a ranger at Spring Valley State Park, roughly 60 miles southeast, discovered a peculiar item at the base of a rusted fire tower. It was a small sketchbook, weathered and half frozen. Inside, several pages of ink drawings of birds, trees, and one page was with a single line, "I saw it blink." Initial attempts to identify the artist were inconclusive, but one detail immediately stood out to Karen Ellison when investigators showed her the sketchbook. The handwriting was hers. In October 2003, 17-year-old Brooke Ellison vanished during a short morning walk near her family's remote cabin in White Pine County, Nevada. Despite a full-scale search and chilling pieces of found evidence, Brooke was never seen again. The only lingering clue, her sketchbook, surfaced days later, miles from where she was last tracked. Now, over 2 decades later, the mystery only deepens. In the days immediately following Brooke's disappearance, the search intensified. By October 25th, the sheriff's department had coordinated over 120 volunteers, 2 scent dog teams, aerial drones, and 1 thermal imaging helicopter. The terrain had already begun to shift with early snowfall, masking further signs. Ground operations ceased on October 30th due to weather and resource constraints. The case was temporarily reclassified as a long-term missing person under Nevada statute NRS 432.205. Then silence. Over the next 18 months, only 4 credible tips were recorded. All were ultimately dead ends. A hitchhiker in Ely claimed to have seen Brooke enter a black SUV. Surveillance footage proved it was a different girl. A man in Pioche mailed in a piece of torn clothing he believed belonged to Brooke. DNA ruled it out. 2 psychics wrote to the Ellisons, both pointing to underground water. Neither message held actionable intelligence. In April 2006, case no. MS-03-4871, Brooke Ellison was officially marked inactive due to insufficient leads. Though technically not closed, no new forensic analysis or field activity occurred until 2014. That year, a wildfire swept through part of the Shell Creek Range. As crews cleared brush, they uncovered remnants of a woman's boot and part of a torn gray hoodie embedded in a tree hollow. Excitement quickly turned to disappointment. The items were from a hiker missing in 1991, later recovered elsewhere. Brooke's case remained unsolved. By 2019, only 1 deputy, Lieutenant Nolan Reyes, who'd first responded to the scene, was still in active service. He described the case as one of those disappearances where it feels like the forest swallowed her. No suspects, no sightings, just a girl gone. The terrain around the Ellison cabin is remote, but not isolated. In 2003, several disused mining roads and forest access points remained open to the public, even without clear signage. Hunters, prospectors, and off-grid nomads were known to pass through. According to 2004 case notes, a person of interest briefly emerged. Raymond Heller, a registered sex offender from southern Utah, who'd been camping near Spring Valley at the time of Brooke's disappearance. Heller had no alibi for October 18th. He'd been stopped for a broken taillight 2 days later, roughly 40 miles east of site. But a thorough search of his vehicle revealed nothing connected Brooke Nuke. No fibers, no belongings, no camera parts. Heller died in 2009 from cirrhosis. Another chilling possibility. A passing trucker or hunter saw Brooke alone, followed her off the trail, and acted on impulse. Critics of the abduction theory point to complete lack of physical evidence. No tire tracks, no vehicle sound reported, no signs of chase or struggle. As Lieutenant Reyes put it, if this was a snatch, it was surgical. No trace, no noise. That's not common. Though less popular, this theory gained quite momentum in the mid-2010s after Brooke's old friend, Danielle Foster, published a blog post describing Brooke as emotionally volatile in the weeks before her disappearance. According to Danielle, Brooke had confessed that she sometimes fantasized about disappearing into the world, starting over in Alaska or Oregon. She also hinted at an online pen pal, a slightly older man named Evan, whom she'd never introduced in person. Investigators were never able to confirm Evan's identity or existence. Brooke's home computer had been wiped clean by a family member weeks after her disappearance to clear out space for Max's schoolwork, removing any browser history. No signs of a bus ticket, forged ID, or bank activity ever emerged. And perhaps most critically, Brooke left behind her camera, her notebook, and her phone, three of her most prized items. If she had planned to vanish, would she have done so without taking anything that mattered? Some locals believe that Brooke fell victim to a natural hazard in the mountains, an undocumented ravine, a collapsed mine shaft, or predatory wildlife. The area is known for sudden drop-offs obscured by foliage. In 2008, a hunter named Charles Webb was found at the bottom of a sinkhole 15 feet wide and 20 feet deep, completely invisible from the trail. He had been missing for nearly a week. Others whisper about the Eye, a local folk tale about a presence in the woods. It's said to watch but never follow, to reveal itself only to those about to vanish. A note found in Brooke's sketchbook read, "I saw it blink." Some dismissed this as a metaphor. Others weren't so sure. Karen Ellison herself once said during a 2013 interview, "I don't believe something took her, but I also don't think she walked away. I think something changed out there, something I don't understand." Wildlife theory proponents argue that a mountain lion or bear could explain the disappearance, but neither blood nor drag marks were ever discovered. Scent dogs never indicated a predator encounter, and Brooke was a cautious hiker, always sticking to visible routes. The terrain theory is the most plausible, but like all the other, it, too, lacks final proof. The Ellison family left their cabin permanently in 2005. It remains unsold, its windows boarded, the wood piles still stacked under the eaves. Karen Ellison became an advocate for missing children legislation in Nevada. In interviews, her tone gradually shifted from hope to resignation. By 2011, she admitted, "I stopped asking where she went. Now I just hope she wasn't afraid." Max Ellison, Brooke's younger brother, rarely spoke publicly. But on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, he posted a photo on Facebook of the Sketchbook page that read, "I saw it blink," followed by the caption, "Still feels like she's just behind the trees." The community marked anniversaries for several years. Candlelight vigils were held at Cave Lake and the Ridgeview Trailhead. But as time passed, fewer people showed up. Eventually, even the local paper stopped running annual mentions, except for 1 year. In 2021, an anonymous letter was mailed to the Ely Times. It read, "If you want to know what happened to Girl with the Birds, look under the Watcher's Hill. There's no official landmark by that name." The envelope bore no fingerprints, no return address. No follow-up was ever received. In the storage unit behind the sheriff's office in Ely, a metal evidence locker still bears a label. Case MS 03-4871. Inside, Brooke's weather-worn Canon camera, the torn note that read, "Don't follow me," and the heavily annotated map used in the original search effort. Karen Ellison, now living in Reno, keeps Brooke's voicemail password active. Her inbox is full, but the final saved message, recorded at 10:32 p.m. the night before she vanished, remains. "Okay, I think I'll do Hunter's Hollow in the morning. Maybe Ridge. Don't worry, I won't go past the stream. Love you." And in Ely, stapled to a splintering telephone pole near the trailhead, a sun-bleached missing poster still flutters in the wind. Her eyes, slightly faded, seem to follow you as you walk past. So, what happened to Brooke Ellison? Was it a tragic accident, a planned escape, or something far more sinister? Drop your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories exploring real-life horrors and haunting disappearances.